All right, folks, welcome back to the culture here on the Black Star Network. We have one more conversation that we wanted to bring you up to date on. And this is the conversation about reparations and how the state of California, the Reparations Task Force, may be moving one step closer to having some of the Black residents of California to receive some sort of financial payout. As of right now, it looks like the state of California might be on the precipice of making history. Now, according to the latest coming from the Reparations Task Force that was established back in 2020, this first and foremost, this task force is the first and only task force in the rest of compared to the rest of the country. But more importantly, this task force is looking forward to having the conversation about how much should Black residents of California should receive. Well, take a look at this. This is coming from KTLA here in Los Angeles. The California Reparations Task Force, they've released estimates as well as breakdowns of the methodology used to determine the amounts, and this was done on Monday ahead of a critical vote that will take place later this week. Now, according to what the task force has put out there as being how they want to move forward on this whole situation, I want to share this with you. Keen, if we can post this, thank you. The California Reparations Task Force, they are talking about, I'm looking at the second paragraph here, folks. It says the possible payments reflect the work of economists who advised the task force and who were asked to estimate the total financial losses suffered by Black Californians impacted by slavery and institutional racism. As outlined by the San Francisco Chronicle, an eligible resident who lived in California their whole life and was 71 or older could, in theory, receive as much as $1.2 million. If approved, the task force would urge that the money begin to be dispersed in the form of, quote, down payments, according to CalMatters. A new state agency would need to establish to distribute funds and determine eligibility, according to CalMatters. That agency would also help Black Californians trace their lineage to confirm that they are eligible for the payments. I want to bring my brother Michael Imhotep back into the conversation around this issue of reparations. Brother Michael, for the task force to lay out this methodology, to lay out, these requirements, what do you say?
Well, they're progressing along. They by July 2023, they have to present their second and final report that makes the recommendations. The interim report came out June 1st, 2022. It's 500 pages. I've read the 28-page executive summary. I'm working my way through the full 500-page report. So they're continuing the task. They were charged with coming up with a methodology to determine the amount for reparations. They weren't charged with putting a dollar amount on it. That's what the state assembly, that's what the state legislature in California would do. The California Reparations Task Force was charged with coming up with the methodology. So they consulted with economists who have done that. Now, once again, as we talked about before here on the show, in the 28-page executive summary, they outline 12 harms. Okay, they outline 12 harms that African Americans have suffered nationwide, but also there in the state of California. They talk about enslavement, even though they've identified about 1,500 people who were in a semi-slavery state in California. When California comes into the Union in 1850, they come into the Union as a free state. They talk about racial terror, political disenfranchisement, housing segregation, separate and unequal education, racism in environment and infrastructure, like the expressways coming through California, as well as through San Francisco, especially wiping out African-American communities and businesses, pathologizing the Black family, control over creative, cultural, and intellectual life, stolen labor and hindered opportunity, an unjust legal system, mental and physical harm and neglect. And the 12th one is the racial wealth gap, So they're continuing in their charge, what they're supposed to do. So what I think is important for us to do is, one, read the first report, especially 28 page executive summary. Two, one of the things that they talked about in the article from KTLA is the California Reparations Task Force is also recommending that a state agency like the Freedmen's Bureau be created to help African Americans. It would need to be established to distribute funds and to determine eligibility, but also help African Americans in California trace their lineage to confirm that they are eligible for the payments. So once again, based upon California state law, race-based policies are illegal. So this is why, in I think it was 2022, they voted to make any type of benefits that are distributed based upon lineage. You'd have to prove your lineage that you were descended from someone who was enslaved prior to 1900 or of African descent who arrived in the country prior to 1900. And what they're trying to do is legally get around the restriction on race-based policies in the state of California. So whatever benefits are passed in the state legislature and signed into law by Governor Gavin Newsom won't get overturned in court when Republicans file lawsuits, because lawsuits are coming. I'm telling you right now, if Republicans file lawsuits to block the debt forgiveness on student loans, the executive order that President Joe Biden did, and that's going to help millions of white people, they're coming after this.
So knowing that, Brother Michael, do you feel like the California Reparations Task Force is prepared? Because, I mean, one is, what's the timeline? Like you mentioned, June of this year.
July 2023, yeah.
Right, July of this year. Mm-hmm. They're going to be presenting their final report.
Right.
So and let's not gloss over the fact that there are still groups out there who have been working within this reparations space who don't even agree with the task force's methodology, the establishment of a California Reparations Task Force, to even go this far into the conversation. So how do we, bring some sort of reconciliation with that situation? You got folks on one side are like, oh man, this is great. And then the other folks are like, this is not enough. This is done wrong. This is not what the reparations movement needs to look like. This needs to be a more federal conversation and not a statewide conversation. So I know that there's some level of infighting that's happening there.
So unfortunately, when a lot of these conversations take place, one, people don't want to deal with reality. Two, people don't want to deal with finances, deal with the budget. The annual budget of the state of California is $300 billion. Okay. So a month ago, when one estimate came out that reparations could total $800 billion. Okay. And that did not include the theft of land. Now that's a calculation, but I would argue that that's 2.5 times the annual budget of the state of California, which probably is not realistic.
Right.
So there's a difference between what is just due and what you can calculate on paper and what can actually be paid by the state of California. This is not the federal government, this is the state of California. Okay. Just like there's a difference between what somebody personally may owe and what they can actually earn and pay in a month or a year. Okay. Right. So yeah, you may owe this debt, but this is all I make. Okay. So deal with it.
You can't, right. I want to stop you right there because I got to take another pause.
All right.
And that's a great point. That's a great point. Folks, when we come forward, we will continue the conversation talking about the latest developments in the reparation movement for the state of California and how that affects the rest of the country. Join us in the conversation and stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network. All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We have been talking about the reparations movement as the California Reparations Task Force is moving further along, taking another step forward to ensuring that Black residents of California get some sort of financial payment. Now, as of right now, the estimate looks like being around $1.2 million for eligible Black residents of California. And those eligible residents would have to adhere to the metric or to the requirements of living in California their whole life, being 71 or older, and that those who would be eligible would have to go through the process of making sure that they are in fact eligible by confirming their lineage for the state of California. And there's a couple of other requirements that Black residents would have to take in order to become eligible for that $1.2 million. The other part about that is that the task force is urging that the money begin to be dispersed in the form of down payments, and that a new state agency would be created to distribute funds and to determine eligibility. Now, we've been talking to my brother Michael Imhotep, about this situation. And Brother Michael, you were making the point that if the state of California brings in a certain amount of money, $300 billion for the state of California, we can expect to ask for more than that, 2.5 times more than that, as you say, for reparations. So the 1.2 million, does that sound more reasonable for residents that are older than 71 here in the state of California?
Well, number one, I'm not sure how many people are going to qualify for that. We'll have to see how many people qualify for that. Two, are the 1.2 million, is it going to be in installments or is it going to be in a lump sum? I'm not sure.
I mean, they said down payments.
So it could be in installments.
Right.
That is only one part of the compensation. That's only one part of the restitution, the cash payments. So a lot of this more will come out when their final report comes out. I know when we looked at San Francisco, for instance, in San Francisco, so like statewide in California, African Americans are like 6% of the population, right around that. Same as San Francisco. Okay, so we'll have to get more details on this. But I wanted to address what you were saying, where you have some groups that say we need to deal with federal legislation as opposed to state. We need to do both. Wherever we are in power, we need to push to repair the damage that government did. This is designed chiefly to repair the damage that the state of California government did, not necessarily the federal government. Okay, we need to deal with the federal government, but the largest effort to deal with the federal government so far has been to get a study done, HR 40. Okay, no disrespect to the Honorable John Conyers from Detroit, where I live, who represented Detroit, and no disrespect to Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas. But if you can't get a study done after 50 years, you can't get that legislation passed in the House and is dead on arrival in the Senate, how do you get a bill passed to pay reparations, to distribute reparations? So my argument is, take the 500-page study that the California Reparations Task Force has done, take the policy recommendations that they're making or modifications of the policy recommendations, and make that at the federal level and pass and push to get those bills, those laws put into effect. And also, as we talked about before, take the title reparations off of it. The reason why is because African Americans are about 14% of the population. Reparations nationally, okay, outside of the African American community, reparations is not popular. So why would you put a term on what you want that does not poll well with the majority of the people who got to vote for this stuff and the majority of the country? Take the policies off, take the title reparations off, push the policies that you want. And then third, the most important thing, explain how these policies don't just help African Americans, but also help the majority population, which many of them do. Because what's good for African Americans are good for America in general. The majority of the people that got to vote on these policies in the House and the Senate are white. And for some reason, that's something that people still haven't figured out. So understanding a business relationship, what's in it for me, you need to explain to them how voting for these policies also helps them and their constituents.
Great points. Great points.
Because you need 60 votes in the Senate.
Right, right.
Okay. There are 51 Democrats in the Senate. Means you need 9 Republicans. No Republicans support reparations. No. Not in the House or in the Senate, not even the black ones. So the way this has to be marketed, it has to be better. Number one. Number two, and people mean well. I understand this. People mean well, sacrifice their lives, things like this. But the way this has to be marketed has to be better. Number one. Number two, our purpose for voting has to be better explained. Stop telling African Americans to vote for exercise. If you want to exercise, you go to the gym and work out. You vote for power. You vote for power acquisition to be able to put people in place to get policies passed that are beneficial to you, your family, and your people. What's good for African Americans is good for America. Politics is the legal distribution that scares wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. Okay. Once you change what the purpose is, the end result, then you understand that you have to lay out a strategy that puts you on the road to accomplish the end result. But if you're told that you vote for exercise, you vote because of Dr. King and Fannie Lou Hamer, even though we need to study their history. No, you vote for the present and the future with the understanding of the past, and we stand on their shoulders. But you have to vote for, see, politics impacts every aspect of our lives, from the water we drink to the air we breathe to the food we eat. Everything deals with politics. So you have to vote for policies that are beneficial to us, as opposed to symbolism, talking about voting to exercise your right to vote. No.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm looking at this piece, and I'm going to get to a couple of crew members before we close out today. But USA Today just put this piece out, Brother Michael, saying that the California Task Force is set to vote on plan for reparations this weekend. They are planning to host their next meeting this weekend, and it's supposed to be set this Saturday at Mills College in Oakland, California.
Right. Yeah, they've been doing a lot of. Go ahead.
Mills College in Oakland, California is where the next meeting for the Reparations Task Force for California will be held at. That will be this Saturday. And they are putting together, as Brother Michael has been talking about, they're putting together their final recommendations to be submitted by June 30th to the California State Legislature.
Right.
So we're talking about a very short period of time. This is already May, the beginning of May.
This has been a 2-year process, basically, a 2-year
process. They're trying to bring it all together.
Right.
And you know, this is going to, if it goes through, and this is you know, you always talking about politics and history and understanding the legal system.
Right.
Gavin Newsom is a contender, or has been talked about, for running for president of the United States.
Well, he's not going to run against Joe Biden. That's not happening. He ain't running against Joe Biden.
He probably won't run against Joe Biden.
Yeah, in the future. Yeah, in the future, he may
might
run.
be, right.
Yeah.
But the fact is that if he decides, if the legislature decides, I mean, this is going to be historic in a very big way.
Right.
Not only just in talking about getting reparations, the cash payout, but you're talking about setting up an infrastructure, a model that other states can start to use, where
correct,
you might have task force in Detroit and in Michigan and Maryland and other places.
Right. Well, there's a reparations task force here in Detroit, but yeah, statewide, yeah, this will set the model. This will set a precedent.
That's all it, yeah.
And for the federal level as well. Yeah.
And for the federal level.
Absolutely.
And for the federal level, right? But, and I was telling a sister I know that because in a lot of cases, because we were talking about this, that a lot of this does have to happen on a state level in order for the president or for Congress to really take it seriously on a federal level, because it's coming out of their budget. It's not coming out of the federal budget. It would have to come, the way the
From the
conversation
state.
is shaping up, it looks like it's going to be coming out of these state budgets rather than the federal budget.
Right, right. And not only that, it would set a precedence, it would set a model that then can be used at the federal level. So first of all, you know, shout out to Camila Moore, attorney Camila Moore, who's the chairwoman of the California Reparations Task Force. I think she's been doing a fantastic job. I've been following this for 2 years, as well as shout out to everybody who serves on the task force. Okay, this is a lot of work. And I think it's really important for us to have realistic expectations of what can come from this as well. Just because you don't get every single thing that you want does not mean what you get is insignificant also. But yeah, we have to push for this. But this is why voting is so important. Okay, you wouldn't get here if you didn't vote the right people into office in the state legislature. And if you did not vote Governor Gavin Newsom as governor, because he's the one who signed off on this legislation that created this task force. That was a bill that came from the California State Assembly. He was the governor who signed off on it. Now, Larry Elder, if Larry Elder had become governor of California, Larry Elder would not condone this. He would reject any recommendations that come from it. He would not have signed off on the bill that created the task force.
Right.
So we have to understand this, you know, and really it ain't about political parties, about whose policies are most beneficial for African Americans, whose policies are most realistic, whose policies would do the least amount of harm, who can create an environment for us to push our agenda the farthest to get the most accomplished, and who will protect gains that have already been made. That's what it's about. So Absolutely. Don't compare. So I'm neither Democrat nor Republican. I'm definitely not stupid. Don't compare Democrats to perfection. Don't compare them to the almighty. Compare them to the alternative. The alternative are Republicans.
There it is. There it is. Brother Michael Imhotep, always a pleasure to have you. Brother, very quickly, let's talk about the work you're doing with the African History Network.
Yeah, so I teach online history classes, among other things, online history classes Saturdays and Sundays. This Saturday and Sunday, we're offering free class sessions. Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade. It's a 12-week online class that I teach. We deal with thousands of years of history, what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. All the sessions we do live, but they're archived and recorded. You can go back and watch them a year from now, 2 years from now. And then Sunday, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I teach another class, Black Resistance Movements, from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement. We look at history chronologically from 1800 to 1968 to understand the laws and policies put in place that brought us to where we are today, to understand where we need to go from here. And you'll learn political self-defense and psychological self-defense as well, understanding our history and culture. So visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, and you can use both of these classes with your children as well. I would say the content is PG-13.
That's awesome. There it is, Brother Michael Imhotep. You can see him here on The Culture, as well as Roland Martin Unfiltered, here on the Black Star Network, one of our great scholars and researchers here. Thank you, Brother Michael. It's always a pleasure.
Hey, thanks, Farajii. All right,
absolutely.
Peace. Proud Boys who were found guilty of seditious conspiracy and some other counts when it came to the January 6th insurrection. Okay. There's an article from the Washington Post. This is from May 4th, 2023, Thursday, May 4th, 2023. Proud Boys Enrique Tarrio, 3 others guilty of January 6th seditious conspiracy. Guilty of January 6th seditious conspiracy. Prosecutors alleged defendants viewed themselves as Donald Trump's army. Prosecutors allege that defendants view themselves as Donald Trump's army, intent on keeping him in power through violence. Okay, this is from May 4th, 2023. Now, former Proud Boys chairman Henry Enrique Tarrio and 3 other leaders of the far-right extremist group, the Proud Boys, were found guilty Thursday of seditious conspiracy in the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. A jury deliberated for 7 days in Washington, D.C. before Henry Enrique Tarrio, 39, and other defendants were found guilty on 31 of 46 counts. Found guilty on 31 of 46 counts. The jury returned not guilty verdicts on 5 counts, including acquitting one member, Dominique Pizzola, of seditious conspiracy, and they were deadlocked on 10 other counts. Now, the result marked the third decisive victory for the Department of Justice in 3 seditious conspiracy trials held after what it called a historic act of domestic terrorism, a historic act of domestic terrorism to prevent the peaceful transfer of power from Donald Trump to Joe Biden after the 2020 presidential election. Now, okay, so we have this article here. There's also one from all the news outlets reported on this. Is one from in the New York Times that I have as well. Okay, we're going to the clip here in just a minute, Doug. Now I want to pull up also the legal definition of seditious conspiracy as well. Now, you have a lot of legal experts who say that this can open the door for special counsel Jack Smith to go after Donald Trump, because Donald Trump wasn't at the U.S. Capitol building on January 6th. He was back at the White House. We know he did nothing for 187 minutes to stop the violence. All right. So they talk about that here in the article as well. If we scroll down to the bottom of page 1, and it says legal analysts. Let me see, where is it? Legal analysts said the convictions on the historically rare and politically weighty crime of seditious conspiracy sent a necessary signal of deterrence, to anyone who might seek to repeat or draw inspiration from that day's violence. The verdict also could carry implications for the former president, for the traitor-in-chief Benedict Donald. Special counsel Jack Smith is investigating whether Donald Trump or those around him broke the law in seeking to hold on to power by fanning false and incendiary claims, just lying their behinds off, okay? By fanning false and incendiary claims that the election was stolen, pressuring state and federal officials to assist the effort, and sending thousands of supporters, and that's putting it lightly, sending thousands of supporters who heard him speak at the January 6th rally to march to the U.S. Capitol. After the verdict, Attorney General Merrick Garland spoke at the Justice Department and said the jury's decision made it clear. Quote, that the Justice Department will do everything in its power to defend the American people and American democracy, end quote. Attorney General Merrick Garland noted that one of the country's largest criminal investigations ever has secured more than 600 convictions. It's actually the largest investigation the Department of Justice has ever embarked upon. There's been over 1,000 people arrested. There's been over more than 600 convictions. There's been about 516 guilty pleas. So we talked about this on Farajii Muhammad show, The Culture, on Thursday, May 4th. Let's go to clip number 2, please, Doug. Pause it right there, Doug. All right, thanks. Pause it right there. Okay, now let's look quickly here at this article, because we're coming up on the break now. This is the article that I mentioned when we came back from the break. This is the article that I mentioned from CNBC.com. DOJ says at least 1,000 Trump supporters arrested for January 6th Capitol riot. This is from March 6, 2023. That's what I could put my hands on right then. Okay. At least 1,000. So it's been over 1,000 people arrested. And if we go look at this quickly here at this article, at least 1,000 people so far have been arrested on charges related to the January 6, 2021 insurrection. About 518 people have pleaded guilty to federal crimes so far, the DOJ said in an update marking 26 months since the riot. Okay, now it's probably closer to the 600 that Attorney General Merrick Garland said. This is from March. This is from March 6, 2023. Okay, so I cited this just to give a reference point. Around 1/3 of capital defendants have been charged with assaulting, resisting, or impeding police during the attack. The DOJ said about 420 defendants have already been adjudicated and sentenced for their criminal activity. Another 53 were found guilty at trials, the DOJ said. Now, this is as of March 6, 2023. Okay, when we come back from the break, we'll deal with how spanking African-American children is a holdover from slavery. Listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. If you like this type of information that we provide at the African History Network, you can support us, $, the AHN show through Cash App, $, the AHN show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. Visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, finance the Sunday night show, the African History Network show that I broadcast on 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF. I've been broadcasting the African History Network show for 13 years, 7 years on 9:10 a.m. WFDF. So we're on Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Here's our PayPal, Cash App information right here on the homepage of our website. So if you want to support us, $10, $15, $25, $50, $100, whatever it is, it definitely helps. You can click right here for the Cash App link as well as the PayPal link. This is our official Cash App account, $, the AHN show. And when you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. These other ones are fake African History Network Cash App accounts. There are 5 that I have identified that have been stealing money from us, fake African History Network Cash App accounts. Our Cash App tag is $, the AHN show, SHOW. If you type it in, make sure you type in the full tag, because these other fake ones will show up before you type in, the HOW. Okay, so that's why I put it right here and put our actual link here. I've contacted Cash App. They've opened an investigation. They're slow as Heinz ketchup. And it was last year that I opened up this investigation. I'm still trying to follow up on them. On Saturdays, I teach ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. It's a 12-week online history course. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. Okay, I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips. So you can register for the class right now. As soon as you register, there's you'll be able to join us for the day's class, and you can go back and watch the previous classes also. Okay, so we deal with history, thousands of years of history, look at what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place, and also we look at, we go through and analyze the transatlantic slave trade. We look at the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors as well. Okay. So in this class, Saturday, April 29th, then on, the class is on sale, $60, regularly $130. On Sundays, I teach, Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. We go through and look at history chronologically. This class will be on Saturday, April 30th, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay. We have a bundle pack. You can register for both of these classes for only $100. You can use this information with the children as well. I would say the information is PG-13. So it's not overly graphic. We won't do a lot of cursing or anything like that. It's not crazy like that. Okay. So you can register for the class, and there'll be 5 of my lectures in the video library in digital format, so you get a bonus of 5 of my lectures also. Now, it took me, I've been teaching this class on and off for 7 years, and I started teaching it back in 2017. I've been studying history 31 years. You see me on Roland Martin Unfiltered. You see me on Farajii Muhammad Show The Culture. Many of you all watch the African History Network show and been following us for years, even when I was on Blog Talk Radio. So with this class, this evolved out of a lecture that I did in January 2014 called Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And that was about 7 years of research. That it was a 4.5-hour lecture. But we can't start studying our history in slavery, even with transatlantic slave trade, which is important to study. We can't start in 1619 or in the 1440s when the Portuguese get involved. In 1441 with Anton Gonzalez. We have to understand the history chronologically and deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who enter into the Iberian Peninsula today known as Spain and Portugal in 711 AD. Now, this course not only deals with the transatlantic slave trade, but it also deals with the thousands of years of history that leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. August 20th, 2019 marked the 400th year anniversary of the 20 and odd Africans who came into Point Comfort in Virginia on August 20th, 1619 on the White Lion pirate ship, in what would later be called the colony of Virginia. Now, this year of 2019 was known as the year of return, as many African Americans were reconnecting to Africa, especially West Africa, and traveling to Ghana and other West African countries. When we discuss the transatlantic slave trade, we have to first understand that African people are the original people of North, Central, and South America, and have been in the land we call the United States of America at least 51,700 years ago. Now, last week when we spoke with Tony Browder, author of Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, and he's also the author of Egypt on the Potomac and Finding Karakamoon, he talked about the Olmecs and Olmec culture as well. And we talked about the African origins, the African root of Olmec culture coming from ancient Kemet. We've interviewed Dr. David Imhotep numerous times, and these are actual slides from the class, by the way. I put together the whole curriculum. There's about 80 to 100 articles that we reference in this class. There's 7 books that we use as reference. You don't have to buy any of the books. We show you excerpts of the book on the screen, okay? But Dr. David Imhotep's book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, it came out in 2011. On page 14 of his book, he deals with a discovery made in Allendale County, South Carolina in 2004 by Dr. Albert Goodyear. Evidence of a African presence 51,700 years ago in Allendale County, South Carolina. Okay. And people are asking for my email address. You can email me right through the website. Go to theafricanhistorynetwork.com, and you can email me right through the website. Also, when we have the website up here on the screen, and then also you can email me as well at ahnshow@theafricanhistorynetwork.com, ahnshow@theafricanhistorynetwork.com. Okay. All right. Now, they found, Dr. Albert Goodyear is an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina. They found 13 different types of evidence to thoroughly document an African presence in the land that we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. They found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. Okay, they found 13 different types of evidence fairly documenting an African presence in this country that we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. Okay, so it's totally ridiculous for people to think, especially for African Americans to think, that African people first came to this land as slaves, conquered and shackled by Europeans. Okay, that's a total misunderstanding of history. Now, this is a picture of Dr. Albert Goodyear. He's a white archaeologist. This is an article from ScienceDaily.com, that came out in November 18th, 2004. The article is about 19 years old. It's still at ScienceDaily.com. You can go back and read it. It's called New Evidence Puts Man in North America 50,000 Years Ago. New evidence puts man in North America 50,000 years ago. Here's a summary of what the article says. Now, this is not my summary. This is the summary coming from ScienceDaily.com. Radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains, where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear, indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old. Indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old, meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age. Okay, so we have to ask the question: well, who were these humans? Okay, who was on Earth 50,000 years ago, 51,000 years ago? Okay, these were the Khoisan. The Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet. They're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They go all around the world. And they were also here in the land we call the United States of America. Now, in October 2012, genetic study published in Science magazine found that the Khoisan in Southern Africa, are the oldest ethnic group of modern humans, with their ancestral line originating about 100,000 years ago. The Khoisan, formerly called by the derogatory term Bushmen, are genetically unique, and no other currently known population had separated so early from our common modern human ancestor, according to the report. Now, here are a couple of Khoisan women. Now, the Khoisan are the short-statured Africans, okay? The Khoisan live mainly in southern Africa in territories spanning Botswana, Namibia, Angola, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. They are largely divided into two groups: hunters and gatherers, known as the Sans people, and keepers of the livestock, known as the Khoikhoi people. The Khoisan languages include the distinctive click sounds, that are not found in the languages of their neighbors. Okay, AtlantaBlackStar.com has a good article entitled 5 Ethnic Groups That Prove the First Humans Were Black. Okay, and some of you will have seen the interview from April 17, 2014, where I interviewed my friend Runoko Rashidi, and we were talking about Chevalier, Joseph Boulogne, and the Moors and the Black Madonnas in Europe. And we're rebroadcasting that interview as well, because the movie Chevalier is out, that talks about Joseph Boulogne, who is also known as the Black Mozart. Okay, and he was born in Guadeloupe. He was half French and half African. But the interview I did, in that interview with Runoko Rashidi, he talks about articles that he was writing for AtlantaBlackStar.com. All right, now, how's everybody doing today? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Be sure to register for this online class. And we have the bundle pack on the homepage of our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, for the online classes. So you get both online classes and you get bonus content as well. It's only $100. It's a $300 value. Even after the course is over with, you'll still have full access. You can go back and watch the entire course. Okay. Or you can watch as much as you want to. All right. So we look at different archaeological discoveries that have come out in the last 15 to 20 years. There was a big discovery that came out in 2010, found on the Greek island of Crete. And they found stone tools that date back at least 130,000 years ago. Okay, stone tools on the Greek island of Crete. Over the course of 2 summers, archaeologists say are at least 130,000 years old, which is considered strong evidence for the earliest known seafaring in the Mediterranean and calls for rethinking the maritime capabilities of pre-human cultures. Okay, so we go through and look at discoveries like Tanis Heraklion, the lost city of Egypt, and there are at least 2 lost cities of Egypt. You have Tanis Heraklion, but you also have Dazzling Aten, and Dazzling Aten was revealed in like the last couple of years. This article from YahooNews.com, sunken Egyptian city reveals 1,200-year-old secrets. Okay, so the British publication, The Telegraph, reports that 150 feet beneath the surface of Egypt's Bay of Abu Qir, they found 64 ships, 16-foot tall statues, 700 anchors, countless gold coins, and smaller artifacts. Archaeologist Frank Gardillo estimates that Tanis Heraklion was built around 8th century BC, Okay, so you're talking about more than 700 years before Cleopatra VII was born. Now, these are some of the artifacts that were found at the bottom of the sea. All right. We look at different archaeological discoveries, and when these new discoveries come out, they're causing the scientists, the archaeologists, and the paleontologists to push the timelines back. And we keep finding out that based upon archaeology, we're much older than we've been told, and Homo sapiens are older than we've been told. So Runoko Rashidi, Dr. Charles Finch, and other African-centered scholars have been saying that African people, or Homo sapiens, modern man, are not 75,000 to 100,000 years old, but at least 300,000 years old. This article from NBCnews.com came out June 17, 2017. We're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. Okay, we're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. So an excerpt from the article says that in all the news outlets picked up this story. They all have New York Times, Washington Post, NBC, CBS, ABC, Associated Press, Time Magazine, National Geographic. They all have articles on this. Modern humans evolved much earlier than previously thought. Researchers reported new discoveries at a rich site in Morocco show modern humans were hunting and probably cooking game animals. 300,000 years ago, which is 100,000 years earlier than what scientists have believed up until now. 100,000 years earlier than what scientists have believed up until now. Now, new discoveries and new dating methods show that, in fact, many of the bones belong to modern Homo sapiens, and they lived as far back as 300,000 or 350,000 years ago. The earliest previous Homo sapiens bones date back 195,000 years ago, and they're from clear across the continent in modern day Ethiopia. All right, so taken together, the findings show modern humans were dispersed across Africa long before anyone ever thought. And not only were we migrating from the Nile Valley region of Africa into Central Africa and West Africa much earlier than people thought, but we were migrating out of Africa and around the world much earlier than many people thought as well. Okay, so we go through and look at a number of archaeological discoveries. We look at the ancient African presence in Asia and in Europe, the African presence in Europe and things of this nature. African people were the first Asians. The earliest modern human Homo sapiens population of Asia were also of African birth. We're speaking of the diminutive Africoids, the short-statured Africans, the extremely important and much romanticized family of Black people, phenotypically characterized by unusually short statures, skin complexions that range from yellowish to dark brown, tightly curled hair, and in frequent cases, like many other Blacks or Africans, stetopegia, which means deposits of fat around the buttocks, or what we would look at as large buttocks, like Sarah Bartman or Sartajay Bartman, okay, who was a Khoikhoi, okay, and we know in the 1800s she was put on display in Europe, okay. And then she's going to become a prostitute. She lived a horrible life. But this is Europeans fascinated with the bodies of African people and African people's sexuality and dehumanizing us at the same time. So they are probably more, these short-statured Africans, these diminutive Africoids, are probably more familiar to us by such pejorative or negative terms as pygmies, negritos, and negrilos. Similar peoples who live today in Southern Africa have been titled Bushmen. More accurate names for these latter people are the San people, translated as original inhabitants. Okay, all right. So we go through and look at this history. We look at the Olmecs as well, and we deal with also the connection between Olmec culture and the new Black Panther movie, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, that brought in the Latino angle with making Prince Namor Latino, and it dealt with the Spanish colonization of Mexico as well, because Prince Namor is 500 years old, and there's a scene where he goes back to when he was a child, and you see the Spanish colonizers conquering his people and enslaving them. Okay, so we go through, and we also this Black Panther, the first movie and second movie, deals with a lot of African culture and African history as well. Mandinka Egyptian Olmec connection. So this comes from page 82 of the First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep. We talked about this last week when I interviewed Tony Browder. A major ethnic group among the ancient Egyptian Nubians were the Manding people, Manding, or the Mandinka, an original Niger-Congo homeland in the general vicinity of the Upper Nile Valley is probably as good a hypothesis as any for the origin of the Manding. The Proto-Manding migration had to have taken place during the African Aqualithic. Okay, now he goes on to say, when the Manding reached Central America and began mixing with the local population, they were labeled Olmecs. When these Africans reached Central America and began mixing with the local population, they were labeled Olmecs. The Olmecs were supposedly a mixture of the Manding or the Mandinka and American Indians or Amerins. Amerinds. Do not forget that the Manding or Mandinka make up the base of the Olmecs. So the Egyptians, the ancient Kemetic people, the Kemiyu, the Egyptians, the Manding, and the base of the Olmecs are related to each other. This is from page 82 of the First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep. So we go through, look at history. We look at this history chronologically as much as possible. We talk about the Druids. We deal with the Greeks and Romans conquering ancient Kemet. And the Druids are dealing with a watered down version of the teachings coming out of ancient Kemet, coming out of ancient Egypt. Okay. And we're going to see the Druids go into Ireland and take this information into Ireland as well. And this is who a British slave named Patrick is fighting against and killing when Pope Celestine I sends Patrick into Ireland in 432 Common Era AD to convert the Irish population to Christianity. And standing in the way of that are the Druids, who are dealing with the gnosis or the true knowledge, and they're dealing with a watered down version of teachings coming out of ancient Kemet, coming out of ancient Egypt. And he is killing the Druids, and the Druids wear a helmet similar to the helmets worn by, or the headdress of Nasubitis or pharaohs in ancient Kemet, and they have an asp on them, or a cobra, a snake. Okay, so they were referred to as the snake people. And when we hear the mythology of Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland, first of all, Ireland is a cold climate, and it's an island, and there's no evidence, there's no archaeological evidence, there's no evidence whatsoever of snakes being in Ireland. So when we talk about Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland, they were talking about the snake people, who were called Druids. That's who this is. A metaphor. It's talking about symbolically. There were no snakes in Ireland. They're talking about him driving the Druids out, who were dealing with a watered down version of the teachings coming out of ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, and then forcing Christianity upon the people. So we deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who are taking the teachings from the Nile Valley region of Africa into Europe, and this brings Europe out of the Dark Ages. They're taking the science and the mathematics and the art and the chemistry, the periodic tables, the medicine, the surgical instruments, all this knowledge they're taking into Europe, and they're Africanizing Europe to varying degrees. And they're also intermixing into the European population, intermixing into the European bloodline as well. We know they lose their last control of the last stronghold of Granada, January 2nd, 1492, in the Spanish Granada Wars. And Christopher Columbus is going to set sail August 3rd, 1492. Okay, we look at things like the Tekken, which is a symbol of ancient, a symbol of resurrection, coming from the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus, okay, known as the first Holy Trinity. Now, some of this information may go outside of the circumference of your own awareness. Just because you disagree with it or don't like it does not mean it's not true. It just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about. Now, there were approximately 1,200 Tekkenu built in ancient Kemet, but only about a dozen are found in Egypt today. Many of the Tekkenu removed from Egypt are now in Istanbul, Turkey, London, France, England, London, England, Paris, France, Berlin, Germany, New York, Rome, Italy, Vatican City, and elsewhere throughout the world. The Tekkenu for plural, the Tekkenu are now called obelisks by their new owners, and few know their origin or that they symbolize the resurrection of the African king Asar. So if you read Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder, page 17, and this is one of the books we use in the class also, Browder deals with this type of information. Now, once again, you don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class, but we use the books for reference to document what we're talking about. And I show you excerpts of the book on the screen usually. All right, now, when we look at Freemasonry, the word Mason is derived from the Latin words mass and sun. Mason means child of light and expresses the desire to pursue light, which is a metaphor for the sun, which symbolizes knowledge. The term child of light, or sons and daughters of light, which was first used to identify students who had completed 42 years of study in the temples of ancient Kemet. Many Masonic temples were modeled after the temples of ancient Kemet, places where light or knowledge was imparted in a series of steps or degrees. So the concept of going to a institution of higher learning and getting your credentials in a series of degrees, okay, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, etc., that concept comes straight out of ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. Okay, Kemet meaning land of the blacks. That comes out of the Nile Valley region of Africa. All right, now read pages 18 and 32 of Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder. So we go through and look at this history. We deal with the Black Madonnas and child coming from the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru being born of a virgin birth on December 25th. And then the decolorized version of that story, and we see the white Mary and Jesus. We look at different Netaru, the forces of nature, the deities in ancient Kemet as well, like Ma'at. We go through and look at some of the history of the Moors. We look at why Christmas is celebrated on December 25th, and that deals with astronomy. We deal with the film Black Panther. The Panther deity Bast comes from Bastet, which is a neter coming out of ancient Kemet. And Bastet was an ancient Egyptian goddess worshipped in the form of a lioness and later a cat. She was a goddess of warfare in Lower Kemet, worshipped as early as about 2890 BC during the Second Dynasty. Okay. We deal with things like what the word Wakanda means. Wakanda is a real word. Wakanda basically means possesses secret powers. We see some different spellings of it. But in Wisconsin, there is a Wakanda Water Park in Wisconsin. It's been there for years. There are schools named Wakanda, like in Nebraska. Okay. And we see Wakanda is Omaha Ponca, Sioux Indian, and Omaha Ponca and Sioux Indian Native American word that basically means possesses secret powers. We go through and look at different some ancient civilizations. We look at Hannibal Barca, and we look at Carthage, the Carthaginians, who were descendants of the Phoenicians. And we know Carthage is destroyed in 146 BC. Founded in about 813 BCE, destroyed in 146 BCE by Rome. Okay, so we look at the Punic Wars. We deal with why Africa was not named after Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus. Africa, we consult Cassell's Latin English Dictionary 2002 edition, page 11, in the entry for a fear. It tells you that Africa means of Africa or belonging to Africa. Publius Cornelius Scipio takes his surname Africanus. He takes that name after he defeats Hannibal Barca at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. So we deal with, the Battle of Cannae, 216 BC. We deal with Hannibal crossing the Alps in 219 BC, but also talk about the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. And then we know Rome is going to conquer Carthage in 146 BC, and Carthage is in the area of North Africa that today Tunisia is. Okay, we talk about ancient Nubia as well, and we look at some of these different African empires that Europe tried to claim as their own. They try to say these were Europeans, these were not African people, these were not Black African people. The same way they're doing with Egypt, the same way they're even doing with Queen Cleopatra, and she was not Nubian, she was not full-blooded African, but she had some African ancestry, as Dr. Charles Finch just explained. Ancient Nubia, or Ta-Nehesi, also known as Kush, as he talked about, and Kush is more of looked at as a region as opposed to, say, a country. But ancient Nubia, also known as Kush, Kush, was a region along the Nile River located in northern Sudan, where the conflict is going on now, northern Sudan and southern Egypt. So the southern portion of what makes up Egypt today, and the upper portion of Sudan in ancient times, that was Nubia. Now, it was home to some of Africa's earliest kingdoms, known for rich deposits of gold. Nubia was a major trading port for luxury goods that came from sub-Saharan Africa, such as incense, ivory, and ebony. Incense, ivory, and ebony. The first monarchy of recorded history was established in ancient Nubia. The Nubians were also known for their exceptional archery skills that provided the military strength for their rulers. Kings of Nubia, or Nasubitis, or pharaohs, ultimately conquered and ruled Egypt for about a century, about 100 years. Monuments still stand in modern Egypt and Sudan at the sites where Nubian rulers built cities, temples, and royal pyramids. Okay, so we go through and look at history like that. Then we look at the history of the Moors going into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal. They go through from Morocco into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal. They defeat the Vandals and the Visigoths. They settle in southern Spain and refer to it as Al-Andalus, which basically means to walk in the spiritual path or walk in the spiritual light. So who were the Moors? The Moors' ancestors were known as the Garamantes, Garamantes, the Garamantes. These were a Black African people living throughout North Africa. Hannibal Barca was Garamantes, as well as St. Augustine. Now, George G.M. James, in the book Stolen Legacy, said that the Moors were the custodians of the ancient Egyptian mystery system. These teachings are going to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. And we know that the word Moors derived from the Greek word maros, M-A-U-R-O-S, maros, which literally means black or a very dark color. Now, the Romans adopted this word and called them Mari, M-A-U-R-I. The Mari were a Northwest African people who were very dark-skinned. The Romans will refer to the region of Northwest Africa as Mauritania. Mauritania is Latin and means the land of the black-skinned people. You'll also see the word Marish, M-A-U-R-I-S-H. Now, Romans later adopt the word as a reference for the black-skinned inhabitants they encountered in Africa. Read pages 527 and 187 in Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivy Van Sertima, which is one of the books we use in the class also. So we go through and look at this history of some of the history of the Moors in Europe, and we deal with Tariq ibn Ziyad going in 711 AD, defeating the Vandals and the Visigoths. But also we have to talk about General Tarif in July 710 AD going in with 400 foot soldiers and 100 horses, successfully carrying out a mission in southern Iberia. This was the reconnaissance mission in 710 AD to get the lay of the land and understand what's going on, understand what they're up against. Okay. So we go through and look at some of the history of the Moors and what the Moors introduced into Europe. We talk about the decline of the history of the Moors as well, how they lost power. We look at the three great West African kingdoms of Ghana, Songhai, and Mali. We talk about the film Black Panther and relationship between T'Challa, who is probably the richest man in the Marvel comic universe, and Black Panther, and Mansa Musa, who's the richest man in history. And there's an article from the History Channel, history.com, called This 14th Century African Emperor Remains the Richest Person in History, from March 19, 2018. And it deals with the relationship between Mansa Musa, who became emperor of the Mali Empire in 1312 AD, and T'Challa. Okay, and we know in the Black Panther movie, T'Challa was portrayed by Chadwick Boseman. Now, West Africa is thriving in 14th century Common Era AD at a time when Europe is ravaged by a lack of resources and raging civil wars. Mansa Musa's rule came at a time when European nations were struggling due to raging civil wars and a lack of resources. During that period, the Mali Empire flourished thanks to ample natural resources like gold and salt. All right. Now, we also have to talk about Christopher Columbus. Columbus is crucial to the spread of slavery and laying the foundation for racism, capitalism, and the exploitation of indigenous people. Columbus never came to the land we call the United States of America. When you look at where he went on his 4 voyages, he goes into Central America, he goes into South America, he goes into the Caribbean. He never comes to the land that we call the United States of America. The closest he comes here is Cuba, which is about 90 miles away. So we look at Columbus, and then we look at the transatlantic slave trade also, okay, and go through and analyze the transatlantic slave trade. The widespread enslavement of diverse peoples for economic and political gain has played a fundamental role throughout human history in the development of nations. Ancient Greek and Roman societies operated by using slave labor, as did many European countries in the modern period. As early as the Middle Ages, Mediterranean cities were supplied with Moorish black slaves from Muslim countries in North Africa. Okay, now, African slaves were brought to the New World shortly after discovery or uncovery by the colonizer Christopher Columbus. Upon his arrival, and Africans could be found on the island of Hispaniola, site of present-day Haiti, as early as 1501. Upon his arrival in the Bahamas, Columbus himself captured 7 of the natives for their, quote unquote, for their education on his return to Spain. However, the slave trade proper only began in 1518, when the first black cargo direct from Africa landed in the West Indies. That was because of the Asiento de Negros signed by King Charles V of Spain in August of 1518. The importation of black slaves or African slaves to work in the Americas was the inspiration of the Spanish bishop Bartholomew de las Casas, whose support of black slavery was motivated by humanitarian concerns. Now, de las Casas travels on voyages with Christopher Columbus, and he writes, keeps a diary. He writes books about this, and I read 2 of his books in college. Okay, Tears of the Indians, I think one of them was. But de las Casas writes about the atrocities inflicted on the indigenous population there. Okay, and he's going to insist on, he's going to suggest that Africans be enslaved, and to a lesser extent, white people also, early on. Now, de las Casas argued that the enslavement of Africans and even some whites, proving that in the early period, slavery did not operate according to exclusive racial demarcations, he argued that they needed to stop enslaving the native population, because this would save the indigenous American Indian populations, which were not only dying out, but engaging in large-scale resistance as they opposed their excessively harsh conditions. As a result, King Charles V of Spain agreed to what's known as the Asiento de Negros. The Asiento de Negros, or the Asiento for short, or what's known as a slave trading license. This was in August of 1518. This would later represent the most coveted prize in European wars, as it gave to those who possessed it a monopoly in slave trading. So it was a license for slave trading companies, and it was a license for them to provide Spanish colonies with African slaves. So we go through and look at history like this, and we look at this history chronologically. Okay, so you can register for this 12-week online class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. You can use this information with your children as well. We understand that African history and culture gives us our foundation, it gives us our values, our interests, and our principles, and it influences our economic empowerment, it influences our self-esteem, our self-development, and self-worth as well. There are also studies that show how teaching our children African history improves their performance in school, it improves their academic work also. So this class is on sale $60, regularly $130. We teach Saturdays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to teach this class today, so you can register now, join us in class. and teaches at our online school, the African History Network online school. On Sundays, Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power movement. Same structure for that class, same price. Register for the bundle pack of courses. You get both classes for $100 as a $300 value. There's also bonus content that you'll get. You get 5 of my lectures that will be in the video library for free also. Okay. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. We had a great interview with Dr. Charles Finch, despite the technical difficulties. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behaviors, not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Also, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me / the AHN show. So this helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting.